Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to week number 10, recorded lecture number 26. Well, in today's lecture, we will cover negative messages, and that include letters, emails, and memos. We will also cover both direct and indirect approaches for bad news messages. Okay, so let us begin with composing effective negative messages. Well, even though it may be impossible to make the receiver happy when delivering negative news, but you can reduce bad feelings and resentment by structuring your message sensitively. Of course, if there is some bad news that has to be communicated, and the effects of bad news, of course, will remain there, but being communicator, we should do our level best to communicate that bad news in such a way that we can decrease intensity of the bad news, right? And at the same time, it should be clear, the bad news should be clear for the receiver, but whatever the possible ways, soft language we can use to communicate it, it will be better and more effective. So most messages contain some or all of these parts, like buffer, reasons, bad news, and closing. This is actually indirect approach for bad news. As I have already said, that for bad news messages, both direct and indirect approaches are used, and these four steps, buffer, reasons, bad news, and closing, they are steps of an indirect approach. We will be discussing both direct and indirect approaches for bad news in our in upcoming slides. Well, we will also discuss apologies and how to convey empathy in delivering bad news. To some extent, we are also going to cover this. Well, first let us focus on the goals in conveying unfavorable news. And when we say unfavorable or bad news, that is always from reader's perspective. That news may be routine news for you, but for the reader, when we say this is a bad news or unfavorable news, it means we have a reader in mind, and we label it bad or unfavorable from reader's perspective. So let's begin with the first step, that is explaining clearly and completely, right? So readers understand and in the best case accept the bad news. Recipients do not have to call or write to clarify the message. One thing, when we say we should make bad news or unfavorable news polite, that does not mean we are trying to hide bad news from the receiver. The bad news must very clearly be stated, right? But it should be clear, right? The words that we use should be soft. The organization should be such that it doesn't hurt the reader, but it should be very clear, and so that the reader does not have any confusions whether that is a bad news or that is not a bad news. The bad news should be stated clearly. Well, second is conveying empathy and sensitivity. Writers use language that respects the reader and attempts to reduce bad feelings. When appropriate, writers accept blame and apologize without creating legal liability for the organization or themselves, wherever appropriate. If the writer somehow was, you know, part of that bad news, or had something, or it was on his part directly or indirectly, so there is no harm in apologizing. But that shouldn't the writer shouldn't go to the extent that, where that becomes a legal allegation that can be used against the writer as an evidence or against the organization, right? Well, number three is projecting a professional image. Uh, of course, uh, professional image is that, we stay calm, we use polite language, and respond with clear explanation of why a negative message was necessary, even when irate customers sound threatening and overstate their claims, right? Sometimes, while receiving or responding, you might have received an email or a letter from a client or from a customer who may have used very harsh language and harsh tone, and there might even be allegations, right? But the customer may or may not be a professional. While writing or responding to that customer, we must not forget that while replying or stating the unfavorable news, we should give the logical reasons that why that claim was not accepted, for example, right? Okay, next is maintaining friendly relation. Writers demonstrate their desire to continue pleasant relations with the receiver and regain their confidence, right? It's not the writer is not in fight with the reader, or nothing should be taken personally, and the personal pronouns I and you in this particular case should be avoided, especially uh, when they give an impression that you are in direct conflict with the reader. So that's not a personal conflict, and that can be a real situation where we have to work according to policies, and so but the closing of the letter or email or memo, as we shall see in in some of the emails that have been included, that should be made such that we should try to rebuild our relationship with the reader at the end of the letter or at the end of the email, right? Okay, then the last one is being fair. Writers show that the decision was fair, impartial, and rational. Yes, we must sound objective. The writer must sound objective while uh, writing a piece of communication or a message for the reader, right? Uh, you know, there shouldn't be even the slightest, doubt of being subjective. You know, you made a decision, there are reasons for that, and there are objective reasons for that, and then you have stated that, right? Well, as I have already said, that for bad news, there can be both direct strategy and indirect strategy. So, this slide covers both the direct and indirect strategies, right? Well, we begin with the first direct strategy. When should direct strategy be used to communicate bad news? Number one, if bad news is not damaging. Damaging means the bad news is routine and the reader expects that news, and it's not going to spoil your relationship with the reader, then you can directly state the bad news, right? Second, if the bad news may be overlooked, that is such a minor bad news that it will even be overlooked by the reader. Or third, if the bad news is preferred by recipient. Some companies have policy, and as a policy they say, well, in all situations direct communication should be made with us. So if you know the company policy and the company has already stated and they prefer receiving direct news, then you can start with the bad news. There is no harm with that. And the last point, if the bad news requires firmness, that it is as it is stated. Well, in these four situations, body part of your letter should be should have these three steps after salutation. You begin with the bad news, then you state the reasons, and the last paragraph should be the pleasant close. So these three steps, preferably these three paragraphs, should be followed. Now, let us see when should indirect strategy be used for communicating bad news, right? So, number one, if the bad news is personally upsetting, that the nature of the news is such that the person, the reader, will get personally upset, then it's better to use indirect approach. Or if you think that the bad news may provoke hostile reaction, the reader may get hostile and may not read the rest of your communication, and you can lose a connection. Well, third, if bad news could threaten customer relationship, as I have covered, that it can, if you are afraid that if you communicate the bad news directly, and that can damage or finish or stop your future relationship, then you should use indirect strategy, right? And the last one, if the bad news is unexpected, that uh, the reader does not expect a bad news, and in that case you should use indirect strategy. Well, in indirect strategy, you start with the buffer, right? A buffer is actually made to reduce intensity of the bad news, right? Buffer is created, just to reduce intensity of the bad news and to prepare reader for the bad news. After buffer, you give reasons, and third step is bad news, and the last step is pleasant close. So these are both direct and indirect strategies that are used and that can be used to communicate uh, bad or unfavorable news to your reader, right? In some certain condition, direct strategy is preferred, and in other conditions, indirect strategy is more appropriate. So we have discussed the condition, and we have also seen the steps. In direct strategy, there are just three steps. You begin with the bad news, you give reasons, and then you go for pleasant close. In indirect, you start with the buffer, then you state reasons, then you share bad news, and then you conclude with pleasant close. So I guess these both direct and indirect strategies are clear. So let's move forward. Well, this is further explanation. In buffer, what should you cover? In buffer, if you have 2 to 3 news to cover, and the one that is the best news, you can use that good news to create buffer. Secondly, you can compliment somebody. The somebody means the reader. You can compliment the reader in the buffer, right? Third, you can appreciate reader for something genuine, and then you can show agreement, your agreement with the reader on certain point, right? You can use facts to create buffer, And then you can share understanding, and you can even go for apology in buffer. As we read some of the messages like emails, letters, and memos, we will come across that some of these buffer strategies have been used. Second step, as discussed in indirect strategy, was reason. Rather, reason is uh, both in direct strategy and indirect strategy. So, reason can be cautious explanation. You have to be cautious. Why? Suppose that why that request for replacement of an item was rejected, right? Second, reader or other benefit, you can also give that in reasons. You can also state company policy. You can use positive words. You can provide evidence that matter was considered fairly and seriously. But you know, then bad news should be embedded placement, right? Passive voice, it should be implied refusal, right? It may not be a direct refusal, but implied refusal. It should, be, it can be a compromise, or it can be an alternative, right? Closing your indirect strategy can be uh, forward looking information about alternative and good wishes, freebies, resale, and sales promotion. They can be included in closing to you know maintain and build on your future relation with the reader. So as we go through some of the messages, we will discuss these steps there as well. Now let us begin with this letter, that is refusing donation request. Of course, when you are refusing donation request, and it is a bad news for the receiver, that they were expecting some donations, and due to certain reasons you are unable to do. Now if we see, this is a block format letter. Everything is left aligned, as we have discussed letter format. We start with the letterhead, Delta Management Association something. Then the date is given. Then receiver's address, or inside address, Miss Kelly Henbury, I guess. Then address of the person is given. Salutation, dear Miss Henry. And then we have the first paragraph, that is actually a buffer, right? That is actually the buffer, the first 2 3 lines. Let's read. Here at Delta Management Associates, we are pleased that over the years we were able to partner with the North Steam Guide Dog Foundation and assist in its admirable program that provides guide and service uh, dogs to build or visually impaired individuals. So this first sentence that stops here, that is you know appreciation, and even appreciation continues. We appreciate your recent letter describing the exceptionally worthwhile Dogs for Vets program that offers trained animals to America's uh, returning heroes needing service dogs. Right? You see, it doesn't directly say yes or no. So, this first paragraph has covered buffer. Now, let's move forward to the second paragraph. Preferably should have, you know, bad news and reasons and bad news, like supporting the good work and worthy projects of your organization and others, although unrelated to our business, is a luxury we have enjoyed in the past. Because of internal restructuring and economic downturn, this is the reason we are forced to take a much harder look at funding requests that were uh, that we received this year. We feel that we must focus our uh, charitable contributions on areas that relate more directly to our business. So these are reasons, and also, the bad news when they say that we feel that we must focus our charitable contributions on areas that relate more directly to our business. So obviously, the organization that has requested for donation is not directly related to their business. So in a way, they have denied the the charity, right? So, and this paragraph covers both reasons and a refusal. Let's read these comments. Well, the left hand comment says transitions with repetition of key ideas, good work, and worthy projects. And then right side comment says explains cutbacks in gifts, thus revealing refusal without actually stating it, right? Okay, the last one, we are hopeful that in future we will be able to again partner with the Northeastern Guide Dog Foundation to help defray the costs of breeding, training, and placing guide and service dogs. You provide an admirable service, and Delta salutes you, uh, closes positively and praises the work so that they can maintain future relationship, right? Cordially, you know, Delta Management Association, and then name of the writer, and above uh, the typed name, the writer has signed J. Rawson. So see, this is the letter that we have gone through, and this letter has all these four steps that we have seen. It has the buffer, it has the reason, it has the bad news, and then it has the positive close. So let's move forward to one. Here we have a look at another email. Let's see. Let's read and try to find out whether this is a direct strategy or indirect strategy. This email is actually declining an invitation. Somebody was invited, and rather, Jonathan was invited, and now Jonathan writes this email to decline the invitation. So after salutation, it is being written to Jonathan. Paulina Montagna, if I can pronounce this name properly. So this person was written, and it was the person was invited by Jonathan, right? So let's start with the first paragraph. News of your leadership position in Delta Sigma, I guess it's P, the campus business honorary club, fills me with delight and pride. Your further your father must be proud also of your educational and extracurricular achievements. So opens cordially with buffer and praises the reader for accomplishment. As praising is one type of buffer, so this email begins with the buffer. Now this next paragraph, should be covering both reasons and bad news. Well, you honor me by asking me to speak to your group in the spring about codes of ethics in the accounting field. But our firm has not yet adopted such a code. We have been investigating the codes developed by other accounting firms. I am decidedly not an expert in this area. These are the reasons. But I have met others who are. Now proposes the alternative. Although your invitation must be declined, I would like to recommend Dr. Harland R. Stone, who is a member of the Ethics Committee, it committee of the Institute of Internal Auditors. Dr. Stone is a professor who often addresses groups on the subjects of ethics in accounting. I spoke with him about your club and he indicated that he would be happy to consider your invitation. This paragraph actually gives reasons and also very clearly denies and but also gives the alternative, which will definitely help their relationship build in future. So the last paragraph, it's good to learn that you are guiding your organization towards such constructive and timely program topics. Please call Dr. Stone at this if you would like to arrange for him to address your club. So provides the person's phone number and detail and assists. So if we read this comment, the last comment on right ends positively with compliments and offer of assistance. So that is how this email concludes positively. So this email also has covered all four steps. The buffer is there, reasons have been stated, and bad news is very clearly indicated. Then alternative has been suggested to maintain the future relationship. Okay, so now let's take this last sample reading for today's recorded lecture. This one, it's block format. Has letterhead, then date is mentioned, and inside address, Mr. Roger Martins. Then dear, as we just straight move towards a strategy that should start after salutation, and the salutation here is dear Mr. Martins. Well, let's see, this is bad news follow-up message. Begin with the first paragraph. You have every right to expect complete confidentiality in your transactions with an independent consultant. As I explained in yesterday's telephone call, I am very distressed that you were called by a salesperson from ABS Payroll Services Incorporated. This should not have happened, and I apologize you again for inadvertently mentioning your company's name in a conversation with a potential vendor, ABS Payroll Services Incorporated. Well, this opens with an agreement, and that agreement is being used as a buffer. And the writer very openly apologizes and clearly mentions that apologizes and mentions that it was an inadvertent act. It was not intentional. It was unintentionally or unconsciously that mistake was made. Then let's move forward towards the next paragraph that says all clients of MKM Consulting are assured that their dealings with our firm are held in strict confidence, and because your company's payroll needs are so individual, and because you have so many contract workers, I was forced to explain how your employees differed from those of others. Now, these are the reasons that the person, the writer, is giving to have mentioned that their name. Revealing your company name was my error. Again, accepts the error, and I take full responsibility for the lapse. Again, takes the responsibility but mentions that was a lapse, that was not intentional. I can assure you that it will not happen again. I've informed ABS Payroll Services that it had no authorization to call you directly, and that its actions were have forced me to reconsider using its services for my future clients. Now, it has the writer has explicitly mentioned the actions that were taken to stop any such actions in future. Now, this is the remaining part of the letter that we started in this, and let's go for the last two paragraphs. All clients of KMs, no, we covered it. No, we have covered the second last paragraph. We shall be going only for the last paragraph. There is a number of other payroll services offer outside programs. I'm sure we can find the perfect partner to enable you to outsource your payroll responsibilities, thus allowing your company to focus its financial and human resource on its core business. I look forward to our next appointment when you may choose from a number of excellent payroll out structuring firms, then signature and all that. Now, this closes with forward look with future relationship. So in this letter, the writer has openly accepted errors but has clearly mentioned that was unintentional, right? Now, tips for resolving problems and following up. So whenever possible, call or see the individual involved. Describe the problem and apologize. Explain why the problem occurred. Take responsibility if appropriate. Explain what you are doing to resolve it. Explain what you are doing to prevent recurrence, and follow up with a message that documents the personal contact, and look forward to positive future relations. So these are some of the tips that the authors have suggested to tackle these situations like the ones where you made mistakes. And anyway, we will read a few more sample letters, emails, and memos in the next recorded lecture, so that you get further clarity of writing bad news messages. And obviously, I'm sure you would be practicing writing bad news messages from the situation given in the court text. So thank you very much, and take care.